Okay, yesterday we talked about routing a little bit, and we made the page controller. Remember that? And our page controller has what in it? Actions, right? And each action goes to its particular view. So the controller comes in, processes some things, and then goes right out to the view and sends the view onto the browser. So whatever is in here, if I come to the About Us page, this is the HTML for the About Us page. If I look at it over here, you see it says Page About Us, Find Me in the App Views. So this is what was generated for us by running the generator when we created a new controller. That was automatically created for us. And so I have all of these methods here and these views. And this is where I'm going to put my content. That's the content for my About Us page is going to be in that particular view. And then how does the rest of the site get filled in? What file is? Right, application.html in the layouts folder in the views. So this is my main page, my template, if you will, for the entire site. And somewhere inside of here, I have a yield command. That yield then opens up the view and stuffs whatever's in the view in place of that yield command. Right? So that's all review. Lot of things to know here. So the next thing we wanted to do was to work on getting our links right in our navigation. All right? So we have to show you a new command, an ERB command called link to. So if we go to the API rubyonrails.org site, we can look up link to, and this is in the action view because that's what we're dealing with is the view. And the link to creates a URL, a whole A tag with the body or what I call the click text, the stuff between the two A tags, and also the URL that it goes to. So it takes care of all of that information with one method call. So that method call returns what, do you think? What type of data does that call return? It returns a string, which is HTML, right? Okay, good. So all we're going to do is pass it the body. They call it the body. That's the stuff between the A tags that is visible on the page. I call it the click text, the stuff you can see. The URL is where it's going to go to. That's the href tag. And then you can pass some other options like classes. You can set a class for this particular URL or that A tag. You can set lots of different options for that. But we don't need those right now. So, and remember yesterday we did that routing command in the rake command, rake routes. Went through our routes file, the routes.rb file, and it found all of the routes that we have set up here and told us what they look like. That command doesn't do anything to my Rails application except show us what it's going to look like. I don't have to run that in order for something to happen. That's purely an informational only command. But it's useful because I can see now I can use these variables. Remember we talked about these variables. These are actually methods that return data, which is the URL that I want to have in that place. And yesterday I showed you we did this once on the login page where I had the, well, let's look at the actual view login page. This is those methods with the underscore path appended to it or the underscore URL appended to it. So page home is here. Page home is the result of a browser doing a get/page/home, and that's going to call the page what? What is that page called? Controller and the home action. All right. So the path gives me a local path. The URL gives me a fully qualified URL with the protocol, the port, everything I need to click from an outside source into my website. And we talked about using that in what case typically? Emails, right. Okay. So we want our links up here to match this login, this routing system. So we're going to change these to be link tos. And I'll just change this one, just show you what it would look like on the page. Link to is a method. It takes arguments. The first argument is what I want the link to look like. So I'm going to say home. The second argument is where to link to, the actual URL of the href that's going to be output. So if I look at this and just reload this page, you note that it turns into a URL now, and the href goes to page/home. Let's look at the source. So inside of this is my actual main content for the view. It created, that link to command created the HTML, this entire HTML string with those two commands. It figured out where to put it, formatted the href, all that kind of stuff for me automatically.
So there are no parentheses anymore.
Right. So remember, in Ruby, there don't have to be parentheses. This and this is one thing that I disagree with. You can put parentheses around this like this, and I like that better because there are some times when I want to link to an image, and in that case, I have to put parentheses around it because an image is another method. So you've got to separate the image with its parameters, becomes one parameter to the link to method. So I think it's safer to put this, but I don't show it this way because most of the tutorials out there, the Ruby guys, the real Ruby hardcore guys, don't like parentheses. So they only use them when necessary.
Is this just for space purposes? Just because
Aesthetically, they like it. It's cooler to them, I guess. I don't know. I'm an old school guy. I like to have my stuff segregated. So I like the parentheses like that. But it's up to you how you do that. All right. So where would I modify my code so that these links actually go to the right place now? Application layout. Okay, good. So in my application layout, I'm going to search through, and I've already changed these, but in place of an A tag, these used to be A tags, I changed it to the link to method, and I say my first one I want to go to look like home, and I'm going to go to the page_home_path. So this is from the routes file here, page home, and then I append the _path because this is a link inside my site. It doesn't have to be a fully qualified HTTP, yada, yada, yada. I don't need that. So for each of these, I'm going to change the navigation links from an A tag to this embedded Ruby =, link to method, and the two parameters that I need. And this is an example I showed before of changing the alt tag. If I want the alt tag to look like something else, I can pass that as one of those HTML options that it showed in the Ruby API documentation. I can pass alt, I can pass class, I can pass an ID if I want to have an ID on a particular link for JavaScript purposes. All of that would be done in that same method.
Which one is style the specific page around the link so that it looks like they're actually on the page? You want to make it like darker or something.
Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. Any questions on how to set that up now? What was that?
That's pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward. Okay, we're going to convert every link on our page to a link to method. So if later down here you have something, these aren't going anywhere yet, so you can leave those if you have stuff like that. The main thing I want is the nav bar to work. And each click of this nav bar should go to the home page So it says page home. And you don't have to have anything in this yet for the assignment. I just need to know that it's going to that controller and that action. So you can just leave this stuff in here for now. Okay, so each one goes to the right place. And so that works great. Now, the question is, how do I make it look different if I'm on that page? So there is another command in Rails called link to unless current. All right, which is a pretty cool command. And it lets me, it creates a link only if this is not the current page that I'm on. Okay? If I'm on that current page, it doesn't make it a link. All right? So it's an inverse logic kind of thing there. So one way to do this, I could just change these link tos to link to unless current. Change all of these like this, and you'll see what I mean by that. All right, link to unless current. Another method takes the same arguments, as you see. Same arguments. I can pass the path, same thing like I did in the link to command. So if I reload my page now, I'm on the blog page, and notice the blog page now outputs just normal text. It's no longer a link. Right? I can't click on that. And why would I want to click on that? I'm on that page. So that's one of the standard conventions that they use. If I go to articles, it lays out all the rest of them because I'm not on that page and leaves this one unlinked. So it links to unless I'm on that page. So these are all links, but I'm on this page, so I don't get a link on this page.
And so that would be something you change in the CSS.
In the CSS, you could change the styling then, in that case, to make that stand out that I'm on this page or something like that. Yeah. Okay, so that's one way to do that.
Is that the way you prefer us to do that?
Yeah, that works good. Depends on your style of your site. Some people don't have any styling to show what page they're on. I think it makes sense. It confuses people less if they know they're on that page. I don't have a strong opinion of that one way or the other, I guess. So link to unless current is pretty cool. Any other questions on that? All right. Now, in the assignment, I talk about moving the navigation to what they call a partial. A partial is like a method or a subroutine or a piece of code that gets inserted like the yield command. Okay, it's a way of separating out chunks of your HTML into separate files and loading them one at a time. In PHP, you would do a separate include for that. Include a chunk of navigation, and then I can include that everywhere, and I only have to change it in one spot. It's another way of making your code drier. And so what I need to do is take this code out and replace it with what they call a partial. So let's do that. The nice thing about RubyMine is it does this for me. I can say refactor this. And down here it says, what do I want to do? I want to move it or I want to extract a partial. So I'm going to extract a partial. And it says, what do you want this to be called? Well, by convention and necessity of Rails, partials must begin with an underscore. So the first part of the name has to be underscore. That's to separate it in the list of files over here so that I can tell right away that's a partial. That's not a full page. So I'm going to say underscore navigation. And RubyMine will put the html.erb on the end of it. And it says, okay, takes it out, and it creates a file over here called underscore navigation.html.erb. So this is just code with ERB in it. That's HTML code with some ERB links that we're going to get evaluated the same way as if they were right in the file, but they're going to get included when the file gets rendered out completely. All right. So how does the application know to do that? In the views, we use the yield command, right? That yielded and got some data from the views and stuffed it in here. For a partial, it uses this render command here. So it took the code out, and RubyMine replaced that with a nice little piece of ERB code that says, call the render method, and I'm going to pass it information telling it it's a partial, and the name of the partial is navigation. Now, and this is confusing, when I call it in a render command, I do not use the underscore. The underscore is only in the file name itself, which is weird. I don't know why they did that. That confuses people all the time. So it makes sense to just leave it alone, put the underscore there if you want to have that. I mean, I don't. But they do it for you. They're going to look for a file with an underscore navigation, and if they can't find that, if you put an underscore, they're going to look for one with an underscore navigation. So you can't put it there. All right. So when this file is rendered, this entire HTML from the navigation file is going to be inserted right here. So if I reload my page, everything should look the same. Aha! I get an error because it can't find the file when I'm loading articles. The articles page is here. This is the view here, and it doesn't know where this navigation page is, so it gets confused here. So what I do is on all my partials that are going to be available on all of my pages, I create a folder called shared. And so in my views folder, I'm going to create a folder called shared. And these are shared partials that I'm going to use. And then I'm going to move that navigation file partial into my shared directory here. Okay, so now it's in my shared directory. The only thing now that I have to do is I have to tell my layout that it's no longer just navigation, it's going to be shared/navigation. And now the Rails will find it. You notice it came up with it right away. All right? So it's going to find it in the shared directory. It's going to, again, we don't put the underscore here. It's going to find it under the underscore navigation file. So now, guaranteed to work. Guaranteed, look at that. So everything works the same. If I look at the source, my page looks identical. Right between the nav bar here, the nav tag, that's the partial that got inserted. So the final output is a bunch of these pieces being fit together into one final HTML page that is sent out to the browser. All right, everybody see that? Now that should give you a clue. I've had a few questions on how do you validate these files? How do I validate this application layout file? Well, you can't validate it. It's like validating the raw PHP code. The only thing we validate is the final HTML page. So to do that, and which is part of your assignment, I have to validate the output, the final thing that gets to the browser. And so once I'm here, I can use the web dev toolbar and say validate local HTML. Isn't that hard?
Oh, that blew my mind. Oh, you errored.
All right, so I have an error, and it says alt not allowed on an element at this point, which is, I guess we can't have an alt tag on an href. Must not. So I'll fix that. Take my alt tag, and where do I find? Okay, good. My partial, my navigation is now over here. So I'm going to take out my alt tags. And reload my page. Reload this page. And revalidate local. Why am I doing local instead of a server? Because I'm local, right? There's no public way to get to my site. All right, so now I'm perfectly fine. Look at that. Isn't that great? Nice HTML5. Let's see if the CSS validates. Remember, I take no responsibility for this because I borrowed this. I'm using this from the internet. I'm using it legally from the internet. All right, so we found some problems. And these are the problems with the Mozilla rounded corner things and the shadows, that these are not standard CSS styles yet. So you can ignore those. Anything with a WebKit or the Moz, you can ignore all of those in your validation tests. But everything else should work. So your site needs to validate, because I'm going to run your server code. I'm going to basically, you're going to give me your entire Rails directory. I'm going to download it, extract it, and run the Rails server right in that directory and try to attach to it, and I'm going to validate it the same way. So I'm going to be able to see, yeah. So if you do it right the first time, you won't have any problems. But all right, any questions on that? Isn't that cool? All right, so let's play around with some, let's get rid of all these files. Let's play around with some ERB files, ERB code. And let's go to the home page just to play with that. Now, we've done a little bit of ERB where we did things like, notice that we have to use the angle bracket % sign to start an ERB command. So, and if I want to print it to the screen, I have to use the equal sign. Okay, so I can do something like this. That is valid Ruby. I can put any Ruby expression inside of my ERB tags. And if I reload that page, I'm going to get, if I'm on the home page, I'm going to get 4. It evaluates the code and returns whatever that expression would have returned. Okay? We do not use puts in a Rails application, which is why I forced you to not use puts in your classes, finally. Your methods all return strings, and the strings get output to the browser. Okay, there's no way to do a puts. So, but I can do things, if I take the equal sign out and reload that, it doesn't do anything because I didn't say print it to the screen. You can think of the equal sign like the puts. I want to print this to the screen. I want this to come out as HTML, right? So if I don't do that, that's a very common mistake, to miss the equal sign. All right? So I can also do things like loops. I can do 7.times do in a loop and close the loop down here, end. So that's a standard loop starting and a loop ending. And inside of here, I can do another ERB expression, or I can just put HTML there if I want. And it will output that piece of text, or HTML, that number of times. So I can do something like ho. All right? So if I reload this, it's going to print ho 7 times. I get 7 hoes here, right? Now, why did it print it all on one line? There's no break. Remember that HTML wipes out all of the white space that it can. It tries to condense white space as much as possible. Even if I put a bunch of these here, it will still look the same on the screen, but the source will look different. All right? The source always has all the text in there between here that I put on the screen. It's just that the HTML will not render it. It squishes all the white space and puts it all in one line. It doesn't recognize that. So if I wanted these all on a separate line, what would I have to do? Do an actual HTML break tag. All right, that's one way to do that. So if I reload this now, you see my ho with some break tags. And if I look at it in the browser, it'll be on its own separate line. Isn't that great? Got 7 hoes coming down the side there. So I can do while loops, I can do expressions, I can do if-then else's. Now, note that I don't want the output of the 7 times do line to be printed to the screen. So if I put an equal sign here, it will actually cause some hurt here. Well, it didn't. Look at that. It didn't in a times. It will if I do an if statement. Okay? What is the result of this 7 times? If I were to do this in IRB, for instance, the result of this returns a 7, and so that's why it's returning a 7 here. If I do something like if, let's do it without it first. If true, print a hoe. It prints a single hoe. But if I put an equal sign here, it should crash. There we go. We get a crash. Because there is no output for an if true command here. That if true, it doesn't know what to do with that. How do I print that to the screen? So that's a common error. You don't use equal signs for conditional statements and most looping conditions, but you do use it if I want to actually print something out. So I could also do this as a string. If I wanted to do this, let's go back to my 7 times. And I don't have to, I can put this inside of a ERB string as well. But what would I have to do? If I just say ho here, okay, I need the equals, very good. Okay, it says undefined method ho. That would be like you putting ho on a line in your Ruby code without parentheses around it, right? It doesn't know what to do with that. So if I put parentheses around it, it will happily output my ho string here. There we go. Got my ho train here going on. All right? So I can also do string concatenation in here. I can output HTML as a string and have it do the same thing. Okay? Now we get into a problem because Rails tries to be safe for you all the time. And what it did was, since this was in a string, it wrote it as a string, and it converted. If I look at the source code here, you'll see that it turned it into an ampersand LT BR / ampersand GT. So it encoded it instead of interpreting it as HTML. All right? So any string that I create in my methods, like my calendar method, etc., I have to convert, tell it that this is okay, I have HTML in here, I know it's okay, and I can call HTML safe on this string. So this is an entire string. I call a method called HTML safe, and it says, okay, I know this stuff is okay, I'm going to allow it to be printed. Why do you think they don't do that automatically? Injection, right. If I have a form and I let people put a comment in, they can type HTML in the form, and if I just display that willy-nilly to the screen, that will change the structure of your page. I could put a JavaScript redirect in my comment and have it go to some other site. So by default, to make it safer, they want you to think about what you're outputting and only allow safe HTML. All right. So this now is back to standard HTML. It converted it back. If I look at my source again, took away and created actual HTML instead of the ampersand LT semicolon. All right. So HTML safe is important there. All right, any other questions here? All right, so I'm going to stop this, but we're going to do some in-class stuff so you guys can wake up and actually do some work here. So.